What's up, everybody? I'm Matt. Welcome to 5-Star Pod Splash. This is our first ever podcast. We're going to be coming to you every week with everything you need to know about the WWE. So pay-per-views, we've got Raw, we've got SmackDown, we've got NXT, we've got all the news and rumors and information you need to know. So since this is our first podcast and today is Sunday, November 20th, Survivor Series Day, we're going to cover the events from yesterday at NXT Takeover Toronto. So we're going to dive right into it. Normally I have a co-host, Chris. He's not here today. He actually missed NXT Takeover Toronto, but he will be with me for future podcasts. So look for him in the future. We're going to dive right into it. So Takeover Toronto, great show. Really great show. I was really pleased with it. Before we get into the results, I just want to talk about a few main points that are really important to mention about NXT Takeover Toronto. The first being, it was a 2-hour show, like most pay-per-views are for NXT. But what really impressed me the most about a 2-hour show with NXT is it feels bigger, it feels longer, it feels like you're getting more content squished into 2 hours than you do get with a regular 3-hour pay-per-view with the WWE or one of these 4-hour pay-per-views they do for the Big Four. For example, tonight is Survivor Series. It's a 4-hour show. I don't want to touch too much on it yet because we haven't seen the pay-per-view. We don't know how it's going to be. We don't know what they're going to do. We don't know if it's going to feel long, if it's going to feel short, if it's going to be good, if it's going to be bad. It's always subjective, but I will say that I think the only pay-per-view that should be 4 hours is WrestleMania. That's just my opinion. I don't think there's enough going on at Survivor Series or the Royal Rumble or SummerSlam to make it 4 hours. Sorry, not Survivor Series, but SummerSlam this summer was an okay show. It wasn't great. To me, out of all the pay-per-views I've seen this year, which is basically I've seen everything this year, it had to have been one of my bottom 2 or 3 so far this year. I was really disappointed with SummerSlam. But anyways, that's out of the way. Let's dive right into it. Let's talk about NXT TakeOver Toronto. So the night started off with Bobby Roode versus Ty Dillinger. Both are Ontario boys. Both got huge pops from the crowd. It's really awesome to see. Bobby Roode was supposed to be the clear heel of the two. Ty Dillinger's a face. We all know that. He's a perfect 10. But both guys got huge pops. Bobby Roode had another great entrance, similar to the one at TakeOver Brooklyn, I believe. TakeOver Brooklyn 2, if I'm not mistaken. That show he came down on this sort of scissor lift. He ascended from the heavens. It was glorious, for lack of a better term. This time he came out to a choir of just people singing his anthem, his entrance song, Glorious Domination. That was really cool. I know some people think his entrance is a little bit long, but to be honest, I'm a huge Bobby Roode fan. I really don't mind it at all. I think it's really great. I think it adds to the theatrics in wrestling, which I think sometimes is a little overlooked these days. You know, I know we're coming from a time where 20, 30 years ago, you had a lot of stock put into gimmicks. And today is more of a sports reality type feel where everybody kind of just plays themselves. They don't really have a real gimmick. They're either just heel or face. So I really like the fact that Bobby Roode really plays into his character. He really believes who he is. He's really arrogant. It's really, really good to see. He's such a heel. He's almost like a cross between a face and a heel because he's not just arrogant, but he's overconfident. But you kind of got to believe in that confidence that he has because he is as good as he portrays himself. Ty Dillinger, again, came out, looked good. I think I read somewhere that he actually creates all of his ring attire himself, which is, I think it's pretty neat. His entrance attire was kind of cheesy, but at the same time, I mean, it's cool. It plays into his character. Again, he's the perfect 10. He has to come out looking extravagant. He wouldn't be a perfect 10 if he just came out wearing a Speedo. So the match was really, really good. It was pretty long for an opening match. And that's not a bad thing. It was a good match. It didn't feel long and drawn out. It just felt like it was just a back and forth, a war of attrition, if you will. It was a really, really good show. Bobby Roode won via pinfall. My question now is, what do you guys think is next for Bobby Roode? Personally, I think he goes for the title now. I'll get more into that after we talk about the match, Nakamura v Samoa Joe. We'll talk about that more. Who gets their shot at the title next? Who's the next contender? We'll talk about that more. But I think who the winner of this match, which ended up being Bobby Roode, is sort of the unofficial #1 contender. Only because there wasn't really anybody else in the mid-card level at this point. There's not really anybody else who can challenge for that title. I really believe that it's either Ty Dillinger or Bobby Roode. The way it ended, to me, it seemed like a curtain call for Ty Dillinger. He sort of stood up in the ring after he lost and he apologized to the crowd, and he said thank you actually simultaneously. Kind of like what Finn Balor did at his last house show. He kind of bowed out gracefully. I think the crowd kind of knew, and the camera kind of hinted at it, because very seldom do you see after a loss, just your standard run-of-the-mill loss for any superstar, you don't see the camera focus in on them for upwards of 2 or 3 minutes and let them say thank you and let them say goodbye. It feels like we're going to see him most likely on SmackDown on Tuesday night, because they are filming SmackDown in Ottawa. They're going to film NXT before that show. I'm going to that show. I'll be there. I'll be there in person with my co-host Chris. So we'll probably know a little bit beforehand, a little bit before most people. But I really think he would be a fantastic addition to SmackDown Live. They don't really have a mid-card on SmackDown Live, honestly. I mean, you've got AJ Styles, you've got Dean Ambrose. The only real mid-card guys they have is Dolph Ziggler and The Miz, and you cannot have those two go at it for another 6 months. I mean, they've got to do something with that roster. They've got to add some mid-card to high-end talent. I know they wanted Shelton Benjamin to come back, and I know he is still coming back, but we may not see that until the Royal Rumble or even later because he's injured. And honestly, I don't know what they're going to do with him. I don't know if they're going to put him in a tag team. I don't know if they're going to give him maybe an intercontinental title run, but we'll have to see after Survivor Series, because the title could not even end up being on SmackDown Live. So after that match, we had the Authors of Pain versus TM61 in the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic Final. Great match. Really, really good match. I have to say, I'll be honest, when I first saw the Authors of Pain, I wasn't enthused. Typically, you see teams come in, especially a team of big guys like that, or even singles competitors, and they get pushed because they're big. They're not good athletes, they're slow, they're sloppy, they don't really have an extensive background in wrestling, but I really don't think that's the case. I don't know the background that the Authors of Pain have, but what I will say is every week I've seen them compete on NXT, they've gotten better, and pairing them with Paul Ellering was probably the best thing they could have done. Triple H has a great mind for the business, and I really think he pushed for Paul Ellering to be with these guys because Paul Ellering makes them feel dominant. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just the presence of Paul Ellering. He does all the talking for them. I'm not sure if they can cut promos in English. I don't think they can. I don't think I have. If I'm not mistaken, and please somebody correct me if I'm wrong, I think they did a promo on NXT a couple of weeks ago and they did it in Spanish. I could just be making stuff up. I don't know. I don't remember. But I know they have not cut a promo in English yet. I don't even know the background of these guys. For me, they really came out of nowhere. And, I follow New Japan Pro Wrestling. I follow Ring of Honor. I follow TNA. I follow Lucha Underground. And I haven't seen these guys wrestle anywhere. So if somebody could fill me in on exactly where these guys came from, that would be really helpful. But anyways, getting back to the match. I really like these guys more and more. Their entrance is really intimidating. It's really cool. From the music to Paul Ellering coming out and calling these guys out almost like they're his hounds of destruction. It's really neat. I geek out on that big time. The match itself was really good. I mean, these guys are not just big, lumbering giants in the ring. They're really athletic. They don't botch anything. They're really, really technically sound, which is impressive because a lot of guys their size, these guys are both pushing 300 pounds. So it's really impressive to see the things they're doing. There was one spot where Shane Thorne climbed up. There was this crane hanging over the ring. It was really, really cool. They placed Paul Ellering in it just so he couldn't interfere with the match. They had him hanging, suspended above the ring. He was watching the match and giving his orders from up there. And at one point, the Authors of Pain were on the outside of the ring. I think Nick Miller's the other member of TM61. He was outside. They were all sort of on the ground. They're all kind of stumbling around. They're getting up. Shane Thorne climbs to the top of this giant crane. It must have been at least 2 stories. Must have been at least 20 feet. He does a senton bomb off the top of that construct. I don't even know what it is. And he lands right on everybody, taking out Nick Miller and the Authors of Pain in the process. But man, what a spot. Very rarely do you see spots like that on WWE programming these days because it is a high-risk move, very dangerous. They've kind of strayed away from that sort of thing, it's disappointing because it does get a huge pop and people really appreciate it. But I understand because it is dangerous. They don't want anybody having a serious injury. Especially not at a live event and a pay-per-view. I think there was a few instances of stuff happening, a few people getting hurt. They kind of want to stray away from that. But the match ended with the Authors of Pain defeating TM61 via pinfall. Both teams looked strong. It didn't make either team look overly dominant, which I think is good because you want TM61 to look strong and you want them to seem like they could be challengers for the NXT tag titles. I didn't predict the outcome of the match only because my thoughts on the match going in was if TM61 won this match, I was thinking that the Revival would hang on to the titles. I thought if the Authors of Pain won, I thought that meant that DIY was going to win that match. We'll get more into that when I talk about the results of DIY versus the Revival. But it made sense. The ending of both those matches made sense. But the Authors of Pain, I find winning that match was sort of the tell that Gargano and Ciampa were going to go over and they were going to finally win those titles. So next we had the following match was DIY versus the Revival. DIY defeated the Revival via submission. It was a best 2 out of 3 pinfalls, or not pinfalls, but best 2 out of 3 match. You had the Revival picking up the first pinfall on Johnny Gargano. That match was great. And I'll go back to TakeOver Brooklyn 2, where DIY faced off against the Revival for those titles. What a match. Honestly, that match was phenomenal. One of the best matches I've seen all year. And when they announced that they were having this rematch, but for the titles, I was excited because I knew what I was going to see. I mean, I didn't know what was going to happen in the match, but I knew that the match was going to be fantastic, and they did not disappoint. It was. Honestly, for me, this was the match of the night, and I'm not surprised at all. I thought that, like I said earlier, the winner of the TM61 versus Author of Pain match would determine the winner of this match because it just made sense to have, the Authors of Pain challenging Gargano and Ciampa, and it also made sense for TM61 to challenge a Revival. So I didn't think you were going to see an Authors of Pain versus a Revival like ultra heel versus ultra heel team, especially because I don't see either of those teams going face at any point. I think they're both career heels. I mean, I don't think you can turn the Authors of Pain face at any point, and I don't think you could turn the Revival face at any point because they're just so arrogant. Unless you wanted to kind of do the anti-hero thing, you'd have to put them against a monster heel team in order to do that. Which I don't see happening. I don't think that's in the plans for them. But the first pinfall, Johnny Gargano down by pinfall. This match went back and forth. It was really good. It had me guessing all the way to the end. I assumed Gargano and Ciampa, like I said, were going to win. But the ending to this match was so great. You had a double submission by both Ciampa and Gargano. They put Dash and Wilder into submissions. Dash and Wilder actually holding hands, trying to get for the other one not to tap out. they both ended up tapping out. What a great ending to that match. They are so over. Gargano and Ciampa, they are so over with the crowd. The crowd loved it. Um, there was a weird instance during their celebration where Tommaso Ciampa went over to somebody in the crowd. There's these two guys wearing soccer jerseys, and he kind of sat up on the barrier. And this guy put his hand over his shoulder, and Tommaso Ciampa ripped his arm off his shoulder and kind of propped himself up on the barrier. He gave him a weird look. I don't know if they know these guys because these two guys, Johnny Gargano came over to them too, and Johnny Gargano gave one of them a kiss on the cheek. So I don't know if they're friends, if they're acquaintances, or what it is. If he just decided to kiss a fan, and Tommaso Ciampa looked like he was really upset with this guy. But anyways, I think this means the Revival is going to debut on the main roster now. They've been two-time champions. They're the only two-time champions. There's nothing left for them to accomplish in NXT. The tag team division is getting stronger with the debut of Sanity, Authors of Pain, TM61. There's a lot of strong teams now. I don't think the Revival necessarily needs to be there anymore as much as they may want to stay. I don't think they need to be there. And I think they're better suited being on a show like SmackDown, only because I don't see a heel team being able to dethrone Slater and Rhino right now. The Usos are heel. They're the biggest heel team. They're the only team that could probably challenge them, but they've already challenged them. They've already lost. The Ascension is going nowhere. They just continue to bury the Ascension on SmackDown. I don't know why. I don't know. Maybe there's something going on behind the scenes that we don't see. But it seems to me like booking or creative does not like the Ascension for whatever reason. They just continue to bury these guys. And they were dominant on NXT. They could be so much more than this, but they just keep getting wasted over and over again. I know I think they won their last match with that mixed tag match, but I mean, that's meaningless. It's not one-on-one. You don't look strong as a team unless it's a one-on-one sort of team match, I should say. Not one-on-one, but you know what I mean. 2-on-2, 2-on-3, whatever. I think if they make their debut, it has to be on SmackDown. Raw doesn't need any other tag teams right now. I mean, they've got the New Day, who aren't going to lose those titles until they beat that record. And I think when they do lose those titles, it's got to be either to Cesaro and Sheamus, Gallows and Anderson, or Enzo and Cass. Those teams are the obvious choice. There's just too many strong tag teams on Raw right now. The Revival, I think, would just get buried. So SmackDown seems like the logical place. They could finally push out a team like the Headbangers. I don't know why they brought those guys back. I'm a huge fan of the Attitude Era, but I didn't even like Mosh and Thrasher then. They're just jobbers. Every show needs jobbers, but SmackDown already has jobbers. They're using the Ascension like jobbers. They have the Spirit Squad. So I don't think they really need too many jobber teams. If they're going to give another heel team a push and they don't bring the Revival to SmackDown, I think it has to be Breezango. I love those guys, to be honest. I really think their gimmick is great. I don't know why they're doing the Fashion Police thing now. I think that's a little bit cheesy, but I really like them when they were kind of doing the male supermodel thing. I think it was really funny. It was really quirky. That was really cool. But yeah, like I said, I really see the Revival making their debut on SmackDown Live on Tuesday night. We'll have to wait and see, but it just makes the most sense. After that match, we had Asuka taking on Mickie James, the returning Mickie James. It was a good match. Really, for Mickie James being out of wrestling, I think it was 6 years since she left. Approximately 6 years. I don't know. I could be wrong. It's somewhere around there. 6 years. It was a really good match. Asuka obviously won. I don't think anybody thought that Mickie James was going to win this match. I don't think there was anybody else in the women's division right now in NXT that could possibly challenge Asuka for the title and be sort of a believable challenger. I think that's kind of why they had to go with somebody from the outside, because Billie Kay seems to be the closest one to being ready, or Ember Moon. But Asuka's kind of like that middle ground between heel and face. I think they're trying to make her into a heel. I can't really tell. The ending Mickie James went to go shake Asuka's hand at the end of the match, and Asuka refused, and she left the ring. I don't know if they're just trying to make her look like a really cocky face or they're trying to turn her heel, but people like her a lot. She's over. I mean, she's just so talented and so dominant. You can't not like her. There's never been anybody like her in women's wrestling, at least not in WWE's side. Um, I think they want Ember Moon to be the next NXT Women's Champion when Asuka makes her main roster debut, which I think is uh, closer to happening than I think most people really think. I think they just needed a buffer between Ember Moon's debut and her taking the title, because Asuka needs a longer reign, a little bit longer of a reign as champion before people really see her as a major threat. So I'm hoping at this point that wasn't a one-off for Mickie James. Like I don't think she came back just for a one-night sort of thing. I think this is a precursor to her at least coming back in a part-time role on the main roster. I hope it's not just NXT. I really hope it's the main roster because she deserves to be there. The women's division could use a leader and sort of a mentor, at least on SmackDown or even on Raw. I mean, it can't hurt having Mickie James around. She knows the business. She was, I think, a 5-time women's champion, and she's just so good. On the mic, in the ring, she knows the psychology of wrestling. She could be a really great mentor for a lot of the younger women in that division. I'm wondering now, like I said, who the next opponent is for Asuka, and I'm gonna say Ember Moon. It just seems logical. It just seems like the right choice. I don't think there's anybody else who could possibly fill that void other than Billie Kay. Maybe Peyton Royce one day, but she's not ready. Liv Morgan's not ready. There's even been rumors of Liv Morgan moving up to the main roster, but she's not ready. They're gonna do what they did with Carmella, and they're going to bring her up before she's ready. Carmella wasn't ready to come up to the main roster, and you could tell when she cuts a promo, when she's in the ring. It's just like Dana Brooke. Not as bad as Dana Brooke. I won't say she's as bad as Dana Brooke, because Dana Brooke is god-awful. I don't like to openly criticize and be harsh on superstars because they've all worked really hard to get where they are. But to me, Dana Brooke is something I don't understand. I'm not going to cover her too much because we're talking about NXT TakeOver here, but I will say that I don't think she was ready to be put on the main roster. She botches every other move and every spot that's not even a move. She couldn't put Charlotte's feet up on the ropes. I don't know. She's no good at cutting promos. She's getting a lot of heat, and they're trying to make her a heel. I mean, she is a heel, but I don't think people boo her because she's a heel. I think she's sort of getting the Roman Reigns treatment. I think people are booing her because they just don't like her. So the final match of the night, that was Shinsuke Nakamura v Samoa Joe, and what a shock. I mean, I think you know just by me saying that how it ended and what happened, but my God, Samoa Joe beat Shinsuke Nakamura. He's the first ever 2-time NXT champion. I knew it was going to be somebody at some point, but I didn't think it was going to be Samoa Joe. I honestly thought that Tuesday night on SmackDown Live, we were going to see Samoa Joe debut on that roster, and he was going to be a mid to upper card guy, or he was going to be an upper card guy. I honestly thought that it was going to be extremely predictable in this sense. So I'm actually really happy I'm wrong, and that's what NXT does best. They swerve the viewers all the time. It is not as predictable as the main roster. They do things that don't necessarily, I'm doing air quotes right now, but you can't see me, make sense. And that's great. That's the great thing about NXT, and that's what everybody should love about NXT. It's not predictable, and that's what we want with wrestling. We don't want predictability. I mean, we know what makes sense. We know what should happen. We know what shouldn't happen, but sometimes you have to do what shouldn't happen. Shinsuke Nakamura is a great champion. He's honestly one of my favorite wrestlers on the planet right now. But I think this is a situation where we're going to see actually Shinsuke Nakamura get pushed up to the main roster. He's too good for NXT. He really is. He's a great champion, and I'd love to watch him on NXT all the time because I think they allow their superstars to be more creative both in the ring and with their gimmicks. And I don't know if the WWE is going to stifle Shinsuke a bit, and I don't know what they're going to do with him because, again, the WWE main roster is very promo-centric. Shinsuke Nakamura's English is not great. He's understandable, but I don't think he's what Vince sees in a top-end guy. You need to be able to cut a promo, and you kind of have to dumb down your in-ring stuff. And that's the thing with NXT. The great thing about NXT is they seem to have a lot of freedom with the pace they wrestle at, and the spots they do, and how stiff they wrestle, and if they're doing shoots or not. The WWE is very follow the script, and if you don't follow the script, you're not going to get TV time, you're not going to get promo time. So I don't know what's going to happen to Shinsuke when he goes to the main roster, and I sincerely hope he's on SmackDown, because SmackDown seems like the show that doesn't stifle people creatively. And that's important, because you look at a lot of guys from, let's say, even the Attitude Era, they got over because they were allowed to be who they were. The Rock was allowed to be who he was. Triple H, Stone Cold Steve Austin. A lot of these guys just created their own gimmicks, and that's who they were. They were just themselves, and that's what's cool. That's what made their gimmick. They were just themselves. It was a good match. It wasn't great. But even the first match I find between Nakamura and Joe wasn't great. I don't know if they have great chemistry. It wasn't, like I said, it wasn't bad. It wasn't the best match of the night. Your main event should be the best match of the night, but it wasn't. It wasn't bad. I liked it. The ending was shocking. I think the celebration was botched. I don't know if it was the WWE Network's broadcast, and I don't know if it happened in the arena at the ACC as well. But when Samoa Joe won, you kind of saw the copyright information in the bottom right corner of the screen, and they started playing what seemed like just stock generic WWE Network music as opposed to Samoa Joe's theme. After about 15-20 seconds, his theme finally started playing. So I don't know if that was something that Kevin Dunn did, if it was a mistake. Maybe it was a shoot and Samoa Joe wasn't even supposed to win. I don't know. It just seems like they weren't ready for the match to be over, and they weren't ready for his celebration. My guess now is, now that Samoa Joe is champion again, are they going to turn Bobby Roode face? Because Bobby Roode has to be the logical choice to challenge Samoa Joe. He's the only guy. Ty Dillinger should probably go to the main roster, but he definitely won't be a number one contender after losing to Bobby Roode. Bobby Roode, I don't know if they want to do heel versus heel for the NXT title. They don't do that very often. It's very seldom do they. I mean, they could do it. Don't get me wrong, and it could be another swerve, and NXT does a lot of that. But I don't see it being something they're going to do. So either I think they're going to turn Bobby Roode face, or they're throwing Bobby Roode right up to the main roster, and they're going to somehow work Ty Dillinger back up to being the number one contender. We'll have to see. I don't know where they're going with this one. They've really got me scratching my head. So one thing I will say about Takeover Toronto that I found was a bit strange. Leading up to this event, I've been reading rumors from PW Insider, I believe it was, in WrestleZone, that JR could be coming back. Good old JR could be coming back to the WWE in some capacity. He was there at NXT Takeover in Toronto in the front row. Camera went right on him, front and center. He said hi. And I noticed after they did that, during one of the sort of the commercials between matches, they were showing some old clips of some old matches from maybe the mid to late 2000s. And they had JR's commentary, again, from those matches, where normally they kind of cut that out. When somebody's not with the company and they didn't leave on the best of terms, they kind of cut them out of the fold. We saw that happen with Hulk Hogan, although he's coming back now and they're slowly working him back into the company now that he's won his lawsuit. But they kind of work you out. So does this sort of open the door for maybe JR to do commentary at NXT? I mean, I know Tom Phillips and Corey Graves are moving up, and they can't be there forever. Corey Graves is on Raw, Tom Phillips is on SmackDown. I love both those guys. They're great. They're the next generation of commentators. So does Triple H maybe bring JR back in to do commentary on NXT? I know JR is a big fan of NXT. That's why he's at the show. It makes sense. Logically speaking, it just makes sense. So we'll have to see what happens with that. That was the last match of the night. There was only 5 matches, but like I said, 5 matches, 2 hours. I mean, it was a good show. It was a really good show. It didn't need to be 3 hours, didn't need to be 4 hours. Could they have put other matches in there? Sure, they could have had, I don't know, a tag match. They could have had Ember Moon and Liv Morgan versus Peyton Royce and Billie Kay. They could have had Sanity versus basically anybody in the tag division, and it would have been a great match. They didn't need it, and it felt big, and it felt important, and it felt like a great show. Yeah, I mean, I can't say enough about NXT. I'm really a huge fan. I'm really excited about this coming Tuesday, the 22nd of November. NXT's taping right before SmackDown Live. I believe it starts at 7:15. I'm wondering if afterwards they're going to film 205 Live. I'm not sure. I think, to me, that sort of the whole 205 Live thing, the Cruiserweight division getting their own show, and it airs on the 29th of November. If it's going to be a live show, that means it's happening right after SmackDown, which I think they made a mistake in announcing that before Survivor Series, because as we know, Kalisto is going to be facing off against Brian Kendrick for the Cruiserweight title. If Kalisto wins, SmackDown gets the Cruiserweight division. Brian Kendrick wins, it stays on Raw. I think we're going to see the Cruiserweight division go to SmackDown only because of how poorly Raw has mishandled the Cruiserweight division with having these 6-man tag matches every night with just a bunch of singles competitors from the Cruiserweight division. There's no story to it. There's no reason for us to care about these matches. They just don't know what to do. And I think SmackDown needs bodies before stuff starts getting sort of repetitive. Like, there's only so much Randy Orton and Bray Wyatt, although I like that feud to a partnership, but there's only so much of that we can see. There's only so much AJ Styles versus Dean Ambrose we can see. There's only so much Miz versus Dolph Ziggler we can see. There's only so much Baron Corbin and anybody that we can see, because Baron Corbin is just one of those guys. He's just a boring guy to watch. So, yeah, I think 205 Live is going to go to SmackDown. I think the Cruiserweight division is going to be on SmackDown. So yeah, that's basically it. Tonight I will be watching Survivor Series. I will be watching with my co-host Chris. We're going to be taking notes. We're going to be hitting you up with a podcast. Maybe tomorrow night. I'm not sure. We'll have to see, because we are going Tuesday. So we're going to be home late on Tuesday. It's a 2-hour drive. We're in Montreal. It's a 2-hour drive from Montreal to Ottawa. We won't be able to do a podcast for Raw on the following day. So that's going to be a little bit late. But what we might do is Wednesday night we might cover both Raw, we might cover SmackDown and NXT, since we saw it before it aired on Wednesday. We'll get it all done in one shot. There's going to be a lot to talk about, but there won't be a lot of title changes. There won't be a lot of big important topics to cover, so we can bang most of those out one after another. What I do want to say before we go, I want to give a special shout out to Monaz Kitchen and Grill. If you're ever in the Montreal area and you love good barbecue, I suggest you hit these guys up on Facebook. They do catering, they do pickup. You can find them on facebook.com/Monaz Kitchen. Monaz, M-O-N-A-Z Kitchen. Check them out. Fantastic. The pulled pork is great. The butter chicken is great. The ribs are great. Everything is good. They do Southern style Kansas City sauces. They do everything in-house. Fantastic. Can't say enough about them. I also want to say thanks to Platinum Orshan. He is a live streamer for gaming, all things gaming. You can hit him up at twitter.com/PlatinumOrt. That's Ort, O-R-T. You could find him on YouTube under the same name. You could find him on twitch.tv/PlatinumOrt. That's PlatinumOrt, Platinumort, all one word. Really great stuff. He streams everything and anything you can imagine. Super entertaining. I've known him for years. Great stuff. Check him out. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. We're going to hit you up hopefully Wednesday night with the next podcast covering Survivor Series, Raw, SmackDown, NXT. Maybe we'll do a special Survivor Series podcast tomorrow just for that. But it's going to be kind of hard to watch Raw and do the podcast for Survivor Series at the same time. So we'll see what happens. Maybe we'll even do one tonight. Who knows? But anyways, thanks for tuning in. I'm Matt with 5-Star Pod Splash. We'll see you soon.